Good evening and welcome to Pellowe Talk. I'm your host, Dave Pellowe, and tonight, as always, we have a very exciting lineup. We have Senator Pauline Hanson joining us, as well as Corrine Barraclough and Professor Augusto Zimmermann. We're going to be talking about free speech. We're going to be talking about the family law inquiry and exactly what's needed there and how that's going. And I expect that may take a fair bit of time. So if we get onto some other topics, there are some things that we can do. As always, you, the viewer, are invited to comment. Leave your comments beneath the video right now and say g'day. Tell us where you're watching from. Make sure you share and invite the opportunity to your friends on social media to jump in and also join the conversation. We want to really get in and have an honest conversation about everything that's on the plate tonight. So I'd like to welcome to the show straight away Senator Pauline Hanson. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Senator.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you for having me on. No, it'll be a good night.
I think so. I think it's sometimes people complain, and they're generally of the left of centre variety, that there's no left of centre people on this panel very often. And there is sometimes, and I really do enjoy talking with people that I disagree with. But I find mainstream media so saturated with the leftist point of view that this is the acoustic treatment to the echo chamber. And so we can thoroughly explore the right of centre ideas, especially those that we disagree with, because we don't all see things eye to eye, even though we're right of centre. So let's have a look at some of the comments coming in through. Kylie Pollard says, great lineup. Michelle says, awesome panel. Gina Machick, I hope I pronounced that right, Gina, says, love Pauline Hanson. And Karen says, fathers have rights to Australia. Michelle's watching from Hobart. Pete from Melbourne. And David Fanning, famous last name, is tuning in. And anyway, lots of people there. Somebody from Gunnedah, Andrew, Bill from Canberra. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining into the evening. Now, as I keep putting some of these comments up, Senator Hanson, can you tell me, One Nation's been around now for a very long time. It's the little engine that could and just keeps chugging on despite all. There's been lots of minor parties, right of centre, and there's been no shortage of attempts to really sling a lot of mud, bring you down personally, even ending up with some time in jail with charges that got later overturned. What's the prospect of the future, though? I'm imagining you'll stand again for Senate and be elected without a problem. But after this Parliament and then after the next Parliament, what's the plan for One Nation still keeping going?
Well, of course, One Nation is not just Pauline Hanson, Dave. We've had, since I came back to lead the party in 2015, we've had, in that period of time, 10 members of Parliament elected to the Parliament. So there was 4 in the Senate in 2016. We had 3 to the Western Australian Upper House, 2 to New South Wales, and of course we've also had 1 to the Queensland Parliament. So the party is growing. I'm building the strong foundations and we are growing with that. I'm really pleased to have Mark Latham on board. He was the opposition leader of the Labor Party and he was touted to be the Prime Minister of this country. He's come on board and he's doing a fantastic job, very much One Nation policies. It's fantastic to see Mark, but we've got Rod Roberts. We've got other great members of Parliament in Western Australia. So where we are at the moment, position, we have the shared balance of power in the Upper House in Western Australia. We have the shared balance of power in New South Wales Upper House, and we have the shared balance of power in the Federal Parliament. I think it's a great achievement. It's about growing the party. I believe that people are looking for an alternative party to vote for that represents their views when it comes to politics, and they believe that the LNP, the Liberal National Party, and the Labor Party have lost their way and not really dealing with the issues that concerns the people of Australia.
Yeah, look, one of the things that I can testify honestly, hand on my heart, about you personally, is that when I met you for the first time in a little function room somewhere north of Brisbane, a bowls club, you didn't know me from a bar of soap. And you gave me the impression that you were genuinely listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually hearing and interested in what I had to say. And it's quite a common perception from you. And the other thing that I think that's quite notable is you're probably one of the exceptions again to why I exist, and why I exist and what I do and seek to have a public voice is to actually help voters to give some currency, to give some weight behind the politicians that we send out to fight on our behalf. And rather than sending you out and saying good luck in the middle between the trenches, to actually stand behind our politicians who are doing the right thing and actually representing our voices, and giving them the moral support and the public support to take a position which will be unpopular in the media and shout it down. I don't know for the life of me why conservative politicians try and bring the media with them. They're never going to be. They're never going to make the media happy. They're always going to be critics. But we need to be out there giving our politicians who are representing us, who are saying what we're thinking, some popular support. The exception that you are is that you've got people behind you, and you've always been fearless. And whether or not I agree with you on everything you say, you've always got the conviction of your words. And I believe, and this is a compliment, not flattery, I believe it's convictions first and career second for you.
Dave, I'm very privileged and very honoured to be a Member of Parliament, trying to represent the people of Queensland, but the people of Australia. And I just feel that the people just don't feel they've had a voice. Yes, when I talk to someone, I don't care who they are. Might be Joe Blow on the street, I wouldn't know who he is, but it's important to me what he has to say. And if he's trying to inform me, because I don't know everything, and I think it's important to listen to people what they have to say.
Yep.
A lot that I say, and it comes from my life's experiences and where my life has taken me. But there's other things that people are telling me, and I've learned so much from just the average person out there that's telling me their issues, their problems. And if I can take that to the floor of Parliament to, spread their word to the other members of Parliament and to enhance legislation that is going to make a difference for the people, then I've done my job.
Yeah. So right now we're looking at, I guess, a long-term plan, and what you've essentially articulated is that the plan for the future of One Nation is getting lots of strong members of Parliament elected to the various parliaments around Australia. Is that a fair summary?
It is, Dave. It's not about Pauline Hanson. Yes, I lead the party. Yes, I actually founded the party by all means. But it can't come down to one person. It's not about Pauline Hanson. It's about getting those voices on the floor of Parliament that are representative of the people. And that's why I call for good candidates to stand. We've got the Queensland state elections coming up. We've got the Western Australian state elections coming up next March next year. I've still got seats available. If you think you can make a difference, then put up your hand, become a candidate. I can't do it by myself. I need a good team around me, and then we can make a big difference. It's about our future. It's not about my future. It's about everyone's future. The future kids, generation is coming along to make sure that we preserve what is so valuable to us, and that's our freedom of speech and our democracy, and where do we go as a country?
Yeah, it's so true. We're going to come to freedom of speech very soon. One question I've got for you before we bring in some of our other guests tonight is, over the years and coming up to this election in Queensland, what have you learned about the candidate recruitment process? Because there's been some unfortunate publicity with some of the candidates, with details that have emerged after they've been pre-selected and endorsed. Is there anything you've changed as time's gone by to improve that recruitment process?
we have a very strict, recruitment that people apply to be a candidate. Then we go through a police check, a taxation check. We go through all the checks with them. We actually assist them and basically hold their hand through the whole process to ensure that we are right there beside them. It's not easy being a candidate. It's a shock to a lot of people because it's a hell of a job to get into politics. You have to have the passion, really care about the country, and you want to make a difference. But Dave, we're not the only ones. Have a look at the other candidates that have been pre-selected by the Liberal Party and Labor Party. They've actually disendorsed them in the last election, the Liberal Party. So it's just not one nation, but the focus has been on us. You've got other candidates, members of parliament of the other political parties have ended up in prison. So, don't focus on one nation.
No, it's a fair point. It's certainly well made that there's certainly candidates from all parties that tend to start embarrassing the party from time to time that they come from. It's not just your problem. But what have you changed? Is there anything that you've changed to tighten up the processes at all?
We're more, 5 years ago, I came back to a party that was just about nearly defunct. And we've built a strong party now with a head office and permanent staff in the office that is, and we've got a system set up that I think is even better than what the major political parties have. So we've really come a long way with One Nation in that period of time. I've had good people around me. And I take a hard line, Dave. I was done over the first time with the people within the party that moved to get rid of me. And this time it's not happening. And I've just, held a steady head at the helm. And when I've, still building the strong foundations and move on from there. So finally, when I step back and no longer a member of parliament, the party will go forward. I believe that there's a lot of support for One Nation. People are wanting the success of One Nation to continue because so many other parties have fallen over. They've gone absolutely nowhere. Jackie Lambie, where did Clive Palmer go? Where did Corey Bernardi's party go? Where did Darren Hinch's party go? So there's been so many other minor parties that have never even got off the ground. So I think we're doing quite well considering the political scene in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. I think the goal, and I've been on the executive of Family First in Queensland, and so I can speak from firsthand. We all want to be the Greens party on the right, the party that just helps hold the major party accountable and honest to the values instead of drifting to the other side of the centre. And the Greens are definitely doing that for the Labor Party. They're dragging them left, well and truly, a very long way left than they used to be. But One Nation is the one that's doing it. One Nation is the one that is sticking around and holding.
Yeah, that's right, Dave. And look, I just want to make it quite clear to people, I'm not the extremist. They all thought that when I got elected back to Parliament, we would be the extreme party. We're not. We are the guiding hand for the conservative side of politics. We've actually have enhanced their policies, their legislation. I've got a lot done. We were instrumental in getting the Banking Royal Commission up. I was instrumental in getting the Dairy Industry Inquiry. I was instrumental in getting the Family Law Inquiry. We've actually, made heaps of other changes and things that I've got done for Queensland, funding and so we haven't been extreme, although I've got the shared balance of power in the Senate, but it hasn't been extreme. And the coalition of I'm very good to work with. And times I even agree with the Greens on the rare occasion about multinationals not paying their taxes, which I've been pushing for many years. So I'm sort of balanced on a way also, even to do with unions. It's not all about getting, and as unions go, we need unions, but they have to be, there is a place for unions, but not trying to run the country and telling businesses how to run their businesses. So, I think I'm more to the centre rather than, I'm definitely not extreme to the right.
No, I agree. And I mean, if you're extreme, we're all extreme. And to a leftist, anybody right of Chairman Mao is a far right extremist. So, take what they say with a pinch of salt. Let's just bring in the other panelists right now. But first, I just want to let everyone know that Pellowe Talk is part of a bigger platform, a conservative website new to Australia called The Good Source. You can find it at goodsource.news. That's SAUCE. You're not just going to get articles there, you're also going to get videos and podcasts from a variety of conservative thinkers, commentators, and freelance amateur journalists, those kind of people that you will not find on the ABC. So would like to now welcome to the show, as well as Senator Hanson, Professor Augusto Zimmermann's empty chair, and Corrine Barraclough. Welcome, Corrine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Nice chair, Augusto.
He was here a second ago. I swear it. I swear.
There he is.
You're just topping up your coffee, weren't you?
Yes.
Welcome, Corrine. Welcome, Augusto. Lovely to have you with us tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, let's have a chat about the deplatforming of far-right extremists, people who don't see eye to eye with Stalin. And we saw that Channel 9, the Today Show specifically, didn't like what Senator Hanson had to say recently. Not for the first time, of course, but this time they found it a bridge too far. So I guess the question is, who won't they deplatform? Is it only somebody that they approve of, or like when you deplatform a politician, Corrine, what's going on? Surely the far left Greens should have been deplatformed, if anybody should have been by now.
But they control the media, don't they? And that's exactly the problem. And you know, Pauline Hanson is someone who's elected. She's the voice of the people. She's down to earth, as she was just saying. She's not an extremist. She's not a racist. But the Green left activist pack have had their eye on her appearances in mainstream media for quite some time. I would say this actually had very little to do with the comments that day. The pressure had been on for a long time. That pack of Green feral activists have had some success in bullying and pressurizing advertisers away from various mainstream outlets, and they wanted to see that success mirrored in this instance. You know, the comments were not specifically divisive. They weren't actually wrong. It was just an excuse, basically, to bend to the activists.
Now, I saw the interview that you had with Andrew Bolt the next day, and he was going through all the leftist media and leftist politicians who were basically saying exactly the same things you said in maybe slightly a different way, Senator Hanson. Have you been pointed out yet which of your comments was uninformed?
No, I haven't, Dave. And let's drop the Senator bit. Call me Pauline, please.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Look, Corrine was right. It's about from the left. They wanted to take the platform away from me to actually give me that access to the public and voicing my opinion. They don't want that. And so they're quite happy to. What was divisive, what was racist? Because when they rang up my staff and said, we can't have Pauline Hanson on anymore because it was racist and divisive. Well, what was racist about it? Oh, well, she's been divisive. So anyway, that's all they said. Nothing I said was racist. When you point out true facts, what is actually happening, and I said nothing different than what was actually printed in the Australian and what Daniel Andrews himself said. So what they didn't like is Pauline Hanson actually said it. So I had to be shut down. Look, it's no loss for me. I don't have to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to do the show, so it's no worries. No problem to me, I can tell you.
August.
Now, Dave. So what's the problem?
We're doing late night and better channels now. So.
Online ratings have been going down and down and down. So it's no great loss. Look, if it's, you know, who's going to lose out of this is the people of Australia, because they won't bear a difference of opinion. And I'm not going to go along with what they want me to say. Never have done, and I'm not going to change my ways. I'm too bloody old for that now. So the whole that, you know, it's about difference of opinion. People raise different issues, debate the issues, and let's find the answers to it.
Yep. Professor Augusto Zimmermann, is there any legal obligation to a mainstream media channel to give equal airtime to popularly elected politicians? And if not, do you think there should be?
Well, there is a tacit consent and arrangement that everybody should have the equal right to express his or her opinion, especially when it comes to the mainstream media, because after all, this is a vehicle that should be about informing people and to tell the people about the different views that people might express. But I'll tell you that there is a problem with the left, especially here in Australia, and it is their bigotry and their intolerance towards different opinions. You have this taking place also in America, where you find some of these extreme leftists actually trying to shut down the debate and using even violent means to prevent others to have the right to have an opinion. Here in Australia, what we have is the implied freedom of political communication, which is a freedom that has been acknowledged by the High Court of Australia. What I find it quite disheartening is that perhaps the legal authorities, including the Attorney General and even the Prime Minister, seem to have so little regard and so little respect for this basic right of the citizen, which is the right to be able to freely express their opinions without being harassed or even laws being used for the purpose of shutting down or silence the debate. We have many laws in this country that directly violate the implied freedom of political communication as envisaged, as acknowledged by the High Court of Australia in many opinions that in this regard made by the court in the past.
Let's have a chat about something major that you're undertaking right now, Pauline, and it's something that you've been advocating for a very, very long time, and that is a family law inquiry. Now, this is an area that I've long been passionate about, but it is so deep and so complex and so complicated, and there's so much emotion involved in this from both sides. That I've really, really put it off because I just want to be better across it. But you've really grabbed this between the teeth, and the government supported you being appointed the deputy chair of the committee. Give us a brief overview to start with. Why was this needed, and how's it going?
David, when I first entered Parliament in 1996, it was brought to my attention most of the complaints that we get across our desk and with all parliamentarians, even to this day, is about family law. It affects so many people. You've got first marriages will break down 30%, and second marriages 60% will break down. So it affects families, children, loved ones, grandparents, extended families. What's happened is our system was brought in, the Family Law Act was brought in 1975, and they set up the family law courts. It was supposed to be a structure that was to help people, you know, going through divorce, and but it's fallen into a heap. So this inquiry, there has been numerous inquiries and to do with the Family Law Act, and this one, when I pushed with the Prime Minister that we had to have an inquiry into it, he listened to what I had to say, and he said, right, you know, you've got your inquiry. And so I ended up being deputy chair of the inquiry. It wasn't the Prime Minister, it was the members on the committee that actually appointed me as deputy chair.
Okay.
So it was, it's going along, and what I find with this inquiry is that It's a voice for the average person out there. The submissions that have come in, it's near 1,700 submissions. We're hearing from the ordinary people how the family law has affected them going through the court system, how they've been separated from their children, they don't get to see the children. It is huge. Hopefully at the end of this, when we hear from people, the recommendations of the committee will make changes to the legislation, to the laws that will help people through this. That'll be a quicker process. They will not be separated from the children. The children hopefully will have a say. Where do I start? It is really huge. And I know Professor Zimmermann has a lot to say about this as well.
Augusto, what do you think? Let's limit it to 3. What would be the top 3 outcomes you think need to happen in family law reform for the equality, justice, and best interests of children across Australia?
Well, there are a couple of things that must be revisited, and that's what I tried to explain during my hearing, in my interaction with members of parliament a couple of weeks ago. And certainly what we need to do as a matter of urgency is to deal with the problem of the child support agency and the link that is quite clear to me between payments of child support payments, and parental alienation. It seems, according to the evidence that I have collected, that the child support agency is effectively operating beyond the limits of legality. It's not complying with basic rule of law principles, including the enforcement of court orders. There are some people who actually are forced to pay more because the child support rewards immoral and irresponsible behavior, including the alienation of children. And this is something that's quite clear to me because I have a mountain of complaints of coming both by fathers and mothers who have been alienated from their children. Another thing that we have to consider is that according to the rule of law, the common law tradition, people are innocent until you can establish by means of evidence they're guilty on certain matters. But there is something called the domestic violence industry, and some lawyers, family lawyers, according to Professor Patrick Paxson, it's not coming from me, this is an article that the leading authority on family law has written. Some unethical lawyers are actually instructing clients to make false accusations so that these clients can take an upper hand when it comes to family court disputes. You're talking about people who are being falsely accused, whose children are being alienated, are losing properties, and sometimes even their bank accounts are being emptied. That is, in my opinion, one of the leading causes of 2 things in this country: homelessness, especially amongst men, and also suicide. There is also a link very clear between this family law industry and the number of men who basically give up of even staying alive. They just decided that it's too hard for them to remain alive, and they commit suicide as a result, including the fact that I can tell you, as a commissioner, I had to actually become more like a psychiatrist or psychologist than a lawyer, trying to prevent people from doing this sort of desperate or committing this sort of desperate measures. They called me in a state of utter desperation and disbelief that the system was actually condemning them to poverty, condemning them to never see their kids again. And how on earth the politicians of this country have the guts to do nothing about this? That beggars belief and tells me that they have no idea about basic principles of due process of law and natural justice. We have basically, as a result of this tragedy, basically repealed the Magna Carta in this country.
Well said, Augusto.
Thank you.
Corrine,
Thank you, Pauline.
Welcome.
Corrine, the system seems to be stacked against men. And I don't think it's necessarily, and feel free to disagree, but I don't think it's necessarily the courts and judges, but those non-government organisations, those family para-government or domestic violence organisations, etc., which are giving advice to the government and to the courts, etc., in these cases, which seem to have a prejudice. Is that substantiated in your mind? There was, What do you think about that?
It's a big question, Dave.
Sure. Sorry.
Yeah.
Feel free to take any aspect of that you want.
Look, it's definitely, I think just to draw it back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, if we can just loop this back into the media, look at the media reaction when it was announced that Pauline was going to be on the family law inquiry. I think the hysterical, screeching reaction to that actually speaks volumes about the very problems that we know are facts within family law. Anybody that works in this area will tell you that good fathers, not abusive fathers, good fathers are being alienated from their children. They're paying child support. There's no ramifications for perjury in family court. Family law is a mess. There's a whole string of issues here, but it's not what the left-wing activists and mainstream media want us to see about family law. They've got very, very tight power and control over this narrative, and they don't want people like Pauline or me or Augusto sniffing around and pulling bravely at strands of truth. They don't want that. They've locked this down. They've decided that men are the evil perpetrators as decreed by feminist theory, and women are the innocent victims, and they will not budge from that. They do not want to enter into any conversation. I have hundreds, if not thousands, over the last 5 years of people contacting me in this country, in the UK, in the US, all around the world. And, isn't it time we need to really ask ourselves here, what other business or what other sector has had this many complaints consistently from every country all around the world, and nothing has been done to shine a light on it? You have to ask yourself, why is the system set up to fail? And who is working very hard right now to keep it that way? I've had lots of complaints from men who've made very carefully written submissions to the family law inquiry, and they've removed all identifiable details in there. And they've specifically asked me to ask Pauline tonight why so many submissions from men are being silenced. Why is it that they are not coming through the family law inquiry? When, if we just cast our minds back to the very beginning, as you said, you fought such a long time to get this off the ground. And when Scott Morrison announced that he was going to run the inquiry, he said it was an opportunity for real people to be heard, real or everyday Aussies. And they're worried that they're not being heard.
Corrine, they are. I'm sorry, they are being heard. And we've actually got a lot of people in camera, so it's not for public hearing. So we're hearing from those dads and organisations. Actually tomorrow we've got a hearing on tomorrow by teleconference. Now we've got the Brotherhood of Fathers and we've got the Lone Fathers Association who are giving evidence tomorrow. So we're hearing from those organisations. But we have heard from the Australian Law Reform, the Barristers Association. We have heard from those, and of course the women's advocates for domestic violence as well. But we have heard from a lot of people who are giving their individual evidence to us. So that's what the public don't get to see. We can't hear from everyone. As I said, we've had 1,700 submissions. Now, what I say, and the last thing I'm going to do is give them any reason to want to shut down this inquiry to take me away from it. And that's exactly what they want to see. Like the Australian Law Council, they actually made complaints about it was streamlined. The hearing, it was a public hearing. They didn't like it being streamlined and called for my being taken off the inquiry. That's what they would love to happen, but it's not going to happen. Now, I have an open mind. Yes, I think by the evidence that I've heard already, I think we have real problems with people from the left, the feminist organisations, pushing their own agenda, devaluing what men are to their children and fathers. And I'll tell these women out there, if you have male children, are you going to want the same for them if they grow up and get married and they actually have their own children? You want to actually distance them from their own children, because that's exactly what you're doing. Everyone has a right to be a mother or a father and spend that time with their children. And this is why we have so many problems, because mostly fathers, and there are some women as well, that have been denied the right to spend time with their children. And that is the problem. And until we sort that out and how to deal with it, and deal with the perjury, contravention of orders, child support, children's protection, that all needs to be sorted out. It's a huge issue, but I think that we can do it if we all work together.
Augusto, and in fact, any of you may be able to comment on this, but there's a couple of things that my research towards this episode have revealed, and some I've been able to substantiate, and some I haven't. One of those is that the current assumption, or the current default position, is a shared custody, that if there's separation, it should be 50-50. That's the legislation. Now, that may need some strengthening, because it may not actually happen as often as the legislation may intend. But one of the other principles that's involved, and that's a good one, there should be equal access, but the higher access, the higher law, is that the best interests of the children should always be served. And so if there's ever any established violence in the relationship or in the separation, then the assumption is no longer given, that transcends. Now, the problem is that it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is to the violence. If there's any violence, if the father was the victim, the target, never ever, and even if the wife totally corresponds and says, yeah, I bashed him up, he never raised a finger, he never did anything verbal or emotional or anything else. If the father's established as even when the father is established as totally innocent, the minute violence has come into the equation, the assumption of equal custody goes out the window, and the primary caregiver, who is usually the mother, ends up with the child. Can any of you confirm or...
Yeah, Dave, it's not actually shared custody, it's shared parenting, so that you actually have shared parenting in the raising of that child. Doesn't mean to say that you're actually going to get 50-50 custody with the child. That's what it is. Now, people are getting that confused with 50-50 custody of the child. It's not the case. So what I think is that prior to separation, if you've both reared the child and you're with the child or children, and there's no domestic violence involved, in the next day you're separated, there's been no domestic violence, there's no issues whatsoever, I think there should be 50-50 shared custody of the children. But it has to be agreed. You sit down and you work it out together. And you say, well, look, I can't take the kids. I've got to fly away to work, I've got, I work all week, so I'll have the kids on the weekend. You don't need the courts to tell you that. Parents should sit down and work it out together. Instead of going through the courts, which are lying in the pockets of the lawyers, these solicitors, it's dragged on for years and years, and then the kids are actually used as pawns. And because you have a hatred for each other that's been building without realising, get on with your lives, make work together in the best interest of the child. But that doesn't happen, and that's the real problem with it. So I'd actually say, unless you have domestic violence, you have a criminal record, or you actually have a drug or alcohol addiction, then you should actually be looking at 50-50 custody with the both children. But you have to sit down. The courts will not decide. You have to sit down and work out who gets the children and when.
What are your thoughts, Augusto?
Well, unfortunately, as a result of what was apparently a good change, the change for no-fault divorce, has actually created some unintended consequences. And I'll tell you the unintended consequences because they are quite clear to me. The person who is planning a divorce, first a separation and then a divorce, he or she might be getting a proper advice from a lawyer regarding the best way to obtain advantages that are, from a moral perspective, perhaps quite questionable, to say the least. For instance, what can happen is that a father, knowing that perhaps it's very difficult for him to obtain full custody, is almost impossible for a man, he might, if he wants, plan in advance, in 1 year or so, with his lawyer, a package of actions that can lead to his upper hand at the family court. Of course, most of the victims of domestic violence, they happen to be men, but I will tell you one thing, it's very easy under the current system to plan a plan of attack that can be quite effective, and it can lead to the full custody of the child. For instance, as I have mentioned before, a false accusation of domestic violence is a very good weapon, by the way. And even when the matter is totally investigated, and then you have a report, for instance, coming from the Department of Child Protection, I have seen cases where the custody is kept with a person who made the false accusation. And after the matter, because it takes so long to be investigated, is finally resolved, the kids have completely lost any access, any contact with the person who was alienated, the parent who happened to be alienated. And to be more tragic about this, because that's the grand finale, we have magistrates who actually keep the custody of the child with the person who made the false accusation, by saying that now the kids are comfortable and used to live now comfortably with the person who made the false accusation. So the crime is actually rewarded as a result. And not only that, but it's a financial reward as well. And at the top of this, we also have husbands who not only are falsely accused, but the wife ceased to have any interest in, for instance, obtaining a salary, and he has to pay spousal maintenance at the top. So I have seen cases of people who have to give basically 90% of his salary to the person who made these accusations, and now obtained, as a result of this very malicious strategy, full custody over the child.
Mm.
Let's have a look at this information from the Judicial College of Victoria. Responding to men who claim to be victims of family violence. While men can be victims of family violence, men are more likely to be harmed by a stranger than by a family member. Quantitative research clearly indicates that the majority of incidents are perpetrated by men against women and their children. The following sections look at... Where did that go? Look at all the things judicial officers should bear in mind, and some of the questions they can ask when assessing a situation. So this instruction here from the Judicial College of all places, in the section about men who claim to be victims of family violence, basically dismisses the entire notion that it's possible and talks about how bad men are. Incidents of abuse towards men is unambiguously demonstrated that relatively few men in heterosexual relationships are solely victims of intimate partner violence. So poo-poos it all, and shame on them for that. Then this one from the Department for Child Protection and Family Support in Western Australia. The information for the Women's Domestic Violence Helpline says This service provides support and counselling for women experiencing family and domestic violence. Go to the same explanation for the Men's Domestic Violence Helpline. This service provides counselling for men who are concerned about their violent and abusive behaviours. Night and day. Chalk and cheese. Why exactly are we having official public narratives that say men are always the perpetrators and women are always the victims?
Because, can I step in there? Because it's all based on absolutely, this makes me so angry. I'll try to keep myself calm as I get these words out. It's all at the heart of feminist ideology and feminist theory sits the Duluth model, which basically insists that men are the evil perpetrators and women are innocent victims. And we see that playing out time and time again. We see it in the media, we see it in the narratives, we see it in TV advertising, we see it in all of the stuff that you've just read there. The data doesn't reflect that. Domestic violence is not a gendered issue. It is not the case that men are all evil perpetrators and women are all the innocent victims. It's not the truth, it's not reality. Just one look at news headlines will give you more of a glimpse in that, and that's before you even start looking at actually peer-reviewed studies. Ever since the 1970s, when Erin Pizzey set up the first domestic violence centre for women's refuge, actually in the Western world, she noted at that point that the vast majority of violence was equally perpetrated, or I think she came up with about the statistic of about 62%. That was in the 1970s. At that point, women's liberation movement saw huge dollar signs in making violence a gendered issue, and a whole industry since then has been built on this. It's worth billions of dollars around the world. It does incredible damage, and I think most people would actually be quite shocked and horrified, Dave, at the stuff that you've just read there. When Scott Morrison makes announcements about government funding or new advertising campaigns, even think back over the last couple of months, they've announced an awful lot of funding for Men's Line. People presume, the general public presumes, that that's going to help male victims, because we all know there are male victims. I've interviewed them. We've seen pictures. We see them on social media. We know that they're out there. You don't have to be an expert to know that exists. Yeah, it makes me so angry. It just makes me so angry. They would just, all of that money is going to basically to help men change their behavior. It's not actually there are no services for men. There is no equality in this. There is no equality of funding. There's no equality in support. There's no equality of compassion. It's all completely and utterly one-sided.
Now, I actually heard in my research that if a husband, a father, concerned about the welfare of his children, makes some complaints or some reports to the appropriate authorities where you should raise such a concern rather than intervening yourself, that's actually regarded as domestic violence against the woman. To insult her capacity to mother, to criticize her capacity to be a fit parent for whatever valid and real reasons may or may not exist, that is, in its first instance, taken on face value as aggression and male perpetrated violence. It sounds like a crackpot conspiracy theory. Am I hearing false rumors, or is this real?
You're right.
Look, can I say something about this, because it's something that's in my heart as well. I was a commissioner, a lot of fun commissioner, and we had to investigate this particular matter when we had to draft the report on domestic violence restraining orders here in Western Australia. And I can tell you that according to the official statistics, we have 1/3 of the victims of domestic violence being male. That tells me that there are far more men who, perhaps twice more men, who don't disclose this sort of information because of the problems that you have raised. These people are so afraid of losing the custody of the kids that they have to endure violence in silence. So I can tell you one thing. I believe that there is a symmetry on this issue. And because of what Corrine mentioned, most of these domestic violence issues involve mutual aggression. And sometimes I can tell you one thing. Not only a man will be disbelieved when it comes to domestic violence matters, but women will be always believed. And when we produced I was not involved, I was against it as a commissioner, but when the government introduced amendments to the legislation, now what we have in Western Australia is a situation that makes it very easy for a woman to approach a police department, to go to a police station and to make a false accusation, because the accusation not necessarily needs to be even substantiated. And this person will have to be evicted from his property as a result of these interim orders. So I can tell you one thing that we have to bear in mind, because I think it's very important. There are many false accusations of domestic violence made by women, and there are many men who are too afraid to disclose to be victims of domestic violence. If the official statistics is that we have 1/3 of those men disclosing that they have been the victims, I guess that there is even a chance that most of the violence is committed by women rather than men.
Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. You were quite right. It was David Collier, who was a former judge. He retired in 2014 after 13 years on the bench in Parramatta Family Law Court. He said a lot of false accusations were made to give them the upper hand as far as getting the children in the courts. And he said there was a lot of false allegations. As far as domestic violence, and just to let you know, domestic violence is not about physical violence, as people may think it is. It can be, you can tell someone you're in fear. So that is a domestic violence. If you actually ring up or you text your ex-partner saying, I want to see the children, she reports that as domestic violence. So it is just absolutely ridiculous. If you spend too much money out of the account, say, and you pulled up and said, look, where's the money gone? We've got to pay the mortgage, but you've spent it on shoes. Well, that's domestic violence. Can I say that it is more the perpetrator is known to be the man, the male against the female. And the stats show that. But as Augusto was saying, a lot of men don't report domestic violence because they feel they won't be believed. In a space of 2 years, it went from 1,500 women who were actually prosecuted for domestic violence, in 4 years it went up to 4,200. And we have had cases where, you know, in a year you've got 2,800 women were hospitalised, but over 500 men were hospitalised due to domestic violence. And a lot of what people don't talk about, and we hear about the deaths of these children or partners, and they say, well, there's one woman being murdered a week. Well, the case is that we have, on average, probably about one man being murdered every 10 days. And we don't hear about those murders that are committed because the media don't report it to the extent as what they do if a woman has been murdered. Yeah. A death is a loss, and I feel for those people, whether male or female.
Of course.
But the fact is that we've, we downplay the male suicide that is happening. Now, a lot of men are suiciding on a weekly basis, but that's never addressed. We don't understand why they're suiciding. But that needs to be investigated. If there was an amount of women suiciding, then there'd be a Royal Commission inquiry into it. And as far as filicide, you talk about filicide, and I've raised this in the inquiry, and all these women's groups and organisations, and they talk about deaths. Filicide, if you go to that filicide is deaths of children by the custodial parents. Now, this is under the Australian Institute of Criminology. Of 76% of the 284 deaths of children around about 2012, 46% were committed by the custodial mother, 29% by the custodial father. Then you have this step parent, the stepdad, and non-custodial. So, you know, they've got to stop pointing the finger at the men all the time, and we need to find out why this is happening. It's about innocent lives. It's about children spending time with both their parents. And that's the answers that I want out of this inquiry. This is where I want the recommendations going, that we can sort out the problems. Because I tell you what, if we don't sort it out, we've got a lot of kids out there self-harming on drugs because they have been denied the right, and they're not even given a voice in the courts to actually have a say in and how they feel about being separated from either parent. So it's a hell of a lot to be considered here. And perjury, that's another thing that's not addressed. Perjury in the courts, contravention of orders, never addressed. You know, they're taken back to court time and time again. They keep denying the other parent access to see children. So until we come down hard on these people and we send out a clear message, it's got to stop. Nothing will change in our system.
Yeah, it's an absolutely huge issue, and there's so much more to talk about. We're going to continue past the 9 o'clock end of show time tonight with a little bit of overtime and try and explore some of the other issues. The legal profession, which there's some really good, honourable, well-motivated people in it. There's also some lawyers that will make a case go on and on and on until all the family's assets have been excluded. They'll encourage false allegations. I know of friends who've had advice from lawyers which amounts to doing illegal activities to provoke the father. Once the father responds like any normal person would, there's a gotcha moment. We're going to go into some of the other issues a little bit. Obviously, we could take 10 shows and not finish this topic, but we're going to go a little bit beyond 9 o'clock tonight. But just to wrap it up and thank our guests, Senator Hanson, thank you so much for the work you're doing and speaking your mind. I love having a politician that I know where they stand, and I can either vote for it or not without having to second guess. I love that
Dave,
about
some
you.
people said, and my children say to me, why did you say it? Why did you have to say it that way? Why didn't you say it some other way? And I said, well, which politician do you want me to sound like?
Good answer. And Corrine, thank you for all the work you're doing. We're going to touch on an article you wrote just before we sign off, if you can spare some more time. And yeah, thank you for all the work you're writing in Spectator and everywhere else, just to keep some really good, honest perspectives in the mainstream media.
Bit of bravery.
Yes.
And Professor Zimmermann, thank you for all the advocacy you do in the legal industry, in training future lawyers, and as your past work as a law reform commissioner. That's really great. Look, for everyone else who's watching, the Good Source, Pellowe Talk is part of this platform, the website goodsource.news. That's SAUCE, goodsource.news. There's many contributors there on a website which is just writing articles and just providing the balance to the leftist infiltrated mainstream media. But we're not just doing articles, we're also doing video shows and podcasts, and there's a great bunch of people on that website. Check them out at goodsource.news. And if you'd like to support the production, unlike the national broadcaster, we don't get taxpayer funds to represent one side of the argument. We're reliant on people who just value the work and want to maybe put in $10 a month to keep it coming. So that would be really, really appreciated. But that's it for the formal part of this night. You can find, what's your website, Augusto?
I have a legal theory association. I happen to be the president now, I'm the founder of an association, a legal theory association called Walter. Mm-hmm. And the website is www.walta.net.au. This website contains also a law journal called the Western Australian Jurist, and the editorial board is most impressive. It's comprised of or consisted of some of the best legal minds in the world. And we produce only high quality academic publications every year. and we post these on the website.
Well, that's Augusto's website there. I've just added it for those who couldn't understand Brazilian. It's I love the way you say W. www. Did I do a good impression? I'm allowed to tease Augusto. We've
That's fine. You're my friend. You can do
shared
that.
Portuguese barbecue together. It comes out in wave after wave after wave after wave of platters that are brought to your table. And he didn't tell me this, and I filled up on the first one. That's Walter, walta.net.au, and you will find all of Corrine's and Pauline's details at their Twitter profile at Pauline Hanson Oz and at tweet Corrine B. Those details are on the screen, and we'll also pop them in the description beneath the video. But we're going to head into overtime now. If any of you need to leave and take care of family or anything else like that, the formal part's over. So thank you very much for your time tonight. We've had a lot of people on the screen. A very good topic and a very good panel tonight. Let's have a look at this article that you wrote, Corrine. Who killed Red Pill lawyer Mark Angelucci and why? Why don't you talk us through that?
Yeah, so Mark Angelucci was a very high-profile lawyer based in California. He basically lived his life on a shoestring so that he could donate millions of dollars worth of his time to looking out for men, mostly, and people who were struggling to get a fair deal, to get justice. He was also the vice president of the National Coalition for Men, so the NCFM. He was very proactive. When the feminist left like to talk about men's rights activists, they like to talk about them being lazy and ineffectual and just a bunch of whingers. Well, Mark Angelucci was incredibly hardworking, incredibly successful, and he was shot at his home in California on Saturday, the 11th of July, just before 4 p.m. Somebody rang on the doorbell of his home in California. He was there at home with some friends. One of the friends answered the door to the delivery man, who said, no, Mark needs to come to the door himself to sign for a package. Mark got to the door, shots were fired, and a white car sped away. I've included all the details in this article that I've written for The Spectator, and I've also tried to list some of the incredible accomplishments that Mark oversaw. He was just an incredible man, an incredible force to be reckoned with, obviously so much so that somebody wanted him disappeared. So there's various suspects kind of emerging. We're obviously on the back of that. I literally wrote that on that piece on Monday. The following day, we had the news that there was a shooting at a judge's house in New Jersey. She had connections to the Epstein case. She was actually in the basement of her New Jersey home, so she came out of the shooting unharmed, but her only child, her only son, was killed, and her husband, the father of the child, was in a critical condition in hospital. So there is all sorts of hell going on at the moment for people who try to enforce justice for all. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and of course we have had zero media coverage. Mark Angelucci was actually in The Red Pill, which is a documentary which opened to protests a couple of years ago. Cassie J, the film director, has written a really heart-wrenching tribute to Mark too on her Facebook page, which I'd encourage people to head over. And also anybody, if there's anybody watching the show who hasn't watched The Red Pill, which highlights lots of these issues, then I would really recommend watching that too. But yeah, that
is a fantastic movie, and I want to endorse. It's a documentary. I want to endorse a very important philosophy, and I was impressed that Cassie J, who called herself a feminist, went on this journey of self-discovery not self-discovery, world discovery, and was able to have an open mind to the facts and evidence of what she was investigating. She started with a foregone conclusion, and she was looking for evidence to confirm it and support it. But she ended up completely shattering her feminist suppositions. And she concludes the movie by saying she doesn't really know what she is anymore, but she knows she's not a feminist. The philosophy I want to advocate to people, I'm not a men's rights activist. I'm not a feminist. What I want to be concerned with is justice for everyone, everywhere, all the time. And any injustice should be all opposed, which is why we object to narrow language like feminism and Black Lives Matter.
100%.
Yes.
You want to say something?
Well, look, I have been teaching, especially when I was Associate Dean for Research at Murdoch University. I was also the unit coordinator for a very important unit called Legal Theory. And I have a book called Western Legal Theory that presents the different perspectives in law, the different schools of law. And one thing that's quite remarkable about this that I'm referring to is that I teach all sorts of controversial topics, including Marxist jurisprudence, National Socialist jurisprudence, legal positivism. And there is one particular topic there about feminism. And I have never, ever been attacked because, I'm very critical of totalitarian regimes, including the Soviet Union. I comment on the Soviet jurisprudence in class. And I also have my teachings about the Nazi legal theory. I have never been attacked by a Nazi. I have never been attacked by a communist supporting the Soviet Union because I am heavily critical of these totalitarian models. But I have seen and I have had experiences of being attacked by these rabid radical feminists to the point that they go to the dean of a law school saying that I have to be fired just because I present this point of view and present the different perspectives on the matter. I tell you, these people are fascists, and they do everything they can to destroy other people's lives. And there is lots of oppression involved because they make everything possible to turn the lives of these people who are very bold and courageous, such as my colleagues that are sharing this program with me, into a total misery. I can tell you that I have been a victim of this sort of attacks, but that encourages me all the more. If they continue doing that, that gives me an extra reason to continue my fight for justice and freedom. And I'm not going to be silent as a result, I can tell you.
Very good.
Corrine, thank you so much for your Corrine. I'm sorry, I keep pronouncing that wrong. I need to just Corrine. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It was a
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Thank you.
So,
what we're saying, and especially what Augusto was saying, is about what is right and what is wrong. And the way our society is going today is, it disturbs me greatly. That's why I'm appreciative of being on the floor of Parliament to actually be a voice for many Australians who have been suppressed because of freedom of speech and because the thought police are out there and you can't say this and you can't do that. And the politicians are actually weakening to it. It's pathetic. Absolutely, a lot of these politicians are so pathetic. They have got no guts about them whatsoever, won't stand up for what is right, and are frightened to put their head up outside the box to actually state what they truly believe. And a lot of them say, oh, look, you can say it, we can't. And I thought, well, you're a member of Parliament. If you can't say it, who the hell can? So, this Black Lives Matter and what's going on is disgraceful, what is happening. And I think a lot of these kids have their heads in the sand. They've been brainwashed. And the Black Lives Matter organisation is really anti-traditional family, anti-father, anti-male, and don't recognise male or female births. Where the hell are we headed with all this? and want to do away with the police in our society. Well, who's going to rein in the crime? Who's going to protect us, make sure that our streets are safe for not only us, but our children as well? What sort of society do they want us to live in? And to go out there and advocate for black deaths in custody. When I stood on the floor of Parliament, I said, well, all lives matter. Well, the politicians were so gutless. There was only myself and Malcolm Roberts that voted on that, and we voted for all lives matter. Do you know that everyone else in the floor of Parliament voted against it, wouldn't vote for it? That's
I don't understand that. I don't understand that.
I don't understand. All it was the motion, all lives matter. Do you know they could not vote for that? They couldn't support it. And this is where we're headed, because they're all terrified of whether they're going to win or lose a vote. As you said, Dave, is that I'm actually, people know what they get with me. And if you don't want to vote for me at the next election, I'm up at the next election. I really don't. It doesn't worry me. I'll just say thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll just get on with my life. But I have to be me, and I'm not going to look back at this time in Parliament and be sorry that I haven't spoken up and said what I felt needed to be said in this country, or fight for the issues that are important to me, and fear of whether I'm going to win or lose a vote. That's not what it's all about. You have to be true to yourself.
Pauline, do you think that would have cost the average Liberal National member of the Senate any votes, or do you think that would have won them votes?
Definitely, it has. It's cost them votes, because that's what a lot of people I'm hearing. Oh, I was once a Liberal voter, I'm not anymore. But I'm also getting it from the other side, from the Labor Party as well. The National Party, they're just falling to pieces. They're not going anywhere. They've lost so much support in the bush. They're not representing the man on the land. We used to have 125,000 farmers 24 years ago. We're down to about 75,000 at the moment. They're not dealing with the water issues. They're not dealing with water security in the country. They're allowing foreign ownership of our land, of our assets. This is just ridiculous. And they never fought for the issues that I fought for. The dairy industry. It was the Liberal National Party that fought against my one bill. They would not vote for giving the farmer a fair farm gate price for the milk. They're the ones that aren't passing it. So, they're not representing the man on the land.
I had Senator James McGrath on Pellowe Talk Live last week, and we had the conversation where he was basically saying, look, I'm a socially conservative politician, but I think that I should, the way I was raised was not to talk about that. And I joined the Liberal Party to talk about economic conservatism, but generally sympathetic with socially conservative causes. What kind of freedom or encouragement even do you give your politicians, your party members, your MPs, to speak on, let's call them, socially divisive issues? Now, let me preface that. I don't say the word divisive pejoratively. I think that's the nature of politics. That's the nature of law. It's adversarial. We call the second most important role in government opposition. Like that's negative. It's conflict-based. We want an argument and an exploration of the truth to arrive at the truth. So when I say divisive, I don't mean it pejoratively. But back to my question, is there an encouragement to speak out on issues which may go down the middle amongst One Nation supporters?
You say what do we go through the process to get candidates? I want strong people who actually will have a voice and will represent their communities. And as I said to the members of Parliament, I don't look over their shoulder of the members in Parliament WA. I don't look over Mark Latham's shoulder. And actually, we don't talk on a regular basis. Mark is his own person. And he was voted in by the people of New South Wales to represent them. If he's doing his job, he will get re-elected, as will the other members of Parliament. I say, I don't live in your state. I can't tell you how to run your state. I've got enough on my own plate running my own state of Queensland and dealing with federal politics. I'm not going to tell them how to run. They were elected by the people. But we are very much all the same line of thinking, same way of thinking. They have so much respect and loyalty towards me, and they realise that they were only elected under the banner of One Nation, would never have got elected in their own right. So it's not about that. It's about working together as a team and making sure that we represent the people of our states or federally to the best of our ability. So I work extremely well with Malcolm Roberts. He leaves me for dead when it comes to climate change and all that issue. You know, he's
Me too.
he's excellent, and you know, he's the best one on the floor of Parliament. He leaves everyone for dead. Even the Greens won't even debating on the issue to do with climate change because he knows too much. He knows what he's talking about. And hopefully we'll make a difference in that area so we get common sense into the debate, into the argument. So, no, I don't rein them in. I talk to them. They ask for my advice. We actually talk matters over, and I explain to them why I think the way that I do, and usually there's no issue.
Great. And do you find your voters... I think I know the answer to this, but let me just ask it anyway. Do they reward or do they punish disagreement with them when you're speaking your mind? And I mean the you plurally, generically of One Nation politicians.
Reward or punish. Look, what's happened to me over the years, and again just recently in this last, when I was up at Townsville, and I was on a stall there with our candidate, Phil Troy Thompson. Anyway, he's actually, I had two people come up to me. One was a woman, probably late 30s, another guy in his 20s, late 20s, and they both apologised to me. They said, you know, years ago I opposed you. I couldn't stand you. I didn't like your policies. I thought you were racist. Now I understand what you were saying, and I actually fully support you, and actually, you know, I vote for you. So these people have changed their opinions about me because they were misled by the media or what was put out by different people. The tagline racist was thrown around. They wouldn't have a clue. I've never made one racist statement. And criticism is not racism. And racist means to you to believe your race to be superior to another. To criticise immigration numbers, that's not being racist. So people need to understand what they're commenting on, and understand the reasons behind why I make these comments about reducing immigration, and the huge numbers we have coming into the country are only propping up our economy. It's like a Ponzi scheme. It's got to come to an end sometime. You can't keep propping it up by bringing more people into our country when one day we'll be so full. So what do? How are you going to keep the economy going? So these are things that I try to explain to people and tell them why we have to go about it a different way.
It's absolutely crazy what the media will call racist nowadays, and also what they don't call racist. It's just like there's everything's racist. In fact, there's an article on the Good Source today where it's showing a video from two actors who are wearing T-shirts. One of them says woke and the other one says racist. And it's amazing how much they actually have agreement on. It's only about 100 seconds long. It's not even 2 minutes. And anyway, head to the Good Source. It's top of the page at the moment. And check it out. It's the leftist doth protest racism too much, methinks. They are the most racist people out there. They see everything through this lens of race. And one of the articles on The Guardian from a few years back has a opinion piece trying to justify black-only spaces, segregation, they're trying to justify racial segregation. And it's like, you actually agree with the racists more than you know. So, yeah. Have we got any questions for Pauline or Augusto in the last few minutes we've got before we wrap it up? So, Pauline, why are the submissions to the family court inquiry not being published, redacted, as per the committee's own email communications? Does that question make sense? Yep.
Yeah, well, if you actually could put in names of judges, places, police areas, or names of people, it won't be published. They won't put it up. Most submissions are published, but we have to protect, even under the Family Law Court Act, you can't publish any person's name in those submissions. But we have the submissions, like I said, there's 1,700 submissions that have been put forward. They are being looked at. We can't read every one of them. It's just impossible to do it. But, you know, we've gone through a lot of the submissions, reading the submissions, and just listening to the people give their evidence, in-camera evidence, meaning those private sessions with one-on-one with the committee and these people of Australia. It's been so beneficial. So I just say to people out there, please don't give up hope with regards to it. I think we have some good committee members, and hopefully at the end of this, we're going to be doing an interim report, hopefully by October. It was supposed to be the final report.
Some people are asking for an update, so end of October.
Yeah, look, by October we'll bring down an interim report. The final report, I don't believe, will come through till next year, because it's been such a huge response from the public with regard to the number of submissions. I think it will be take a lot longer than that to actually go through it and make sure that we do get it right. I don't want it rushed, and I'd rather take the time and hopefully bring it down next year.
Here's a question for both of you from Peter Z. The most important issue in family court is trial by evidence, like in homicide cases. Augusto, do you think trial by evidence can work in family court? And Pauline, do you see this being instituted in family court after this parliamentary investigation?
Well, I'm not so sure whether this is, certainly evidence is a very important element in order to obtain justice to the matter. So obviously, nobody should be a victim of an accusation that has not been evidenced, or that hasn't been proven. So this is a very important point. But what I have to say is that the adversarial model is a counterproductive one, especially to matters of family law. I would sustain the argument here that perhaps the best way to go also is to allow the judge to have his own capacity to investigate the matter. That would amount to something that is akin to the civil law system. That's not the common law. The common law system works very well when it comes to commercial law issues and other areas of law. But when it comes to family matters, we should avoid, by all means, the escalation of conflict. And I believe that the only ones really profiting at the expense, of course, of people's misery are the family lawyers themselves, especially when they act in bad faith by colluding to one another in order to increase the costs of the legal process. What I have to tell you is that, unfortunately, as you have perhaps, I think you have mentioned that, if I'm not wrong, there are some people who, in the end of this whole ordeal, are absolutely destitute financially and completely bankrupt. So we have to sort of make a solution, have a solution for the problem. And I'll tell you one thing: the best thing we do is to de-escalate the conflict rather than make it worse. And the adversarial model is an invitation for collusion between lawyers, and for the matters to be extended ad infinitum, so that the parties have to go through this for a long period of time. And this will be obviously at the cost of fundamental rights, especially the rights of the children to have a normal life and develop a meaningful relationship with both parents.
And Senator Hanson, do you see this trial by evidence being instituted in family court after this investigation?
Well, any other court, if you've got a civil matter that comes before the courts, you have to prove evidence. So if a crime's been committed, they have to be determination is made based on evidence produced in the court. And I feel that a lot of people out there feel that they've been accused of domestic violence, which wasn't the case. And again, what I was saying is perjury. So the courts accept that domestic violence, they're denied the right then to see the children. It goes on for months and years. Then, the connection back with the kids again, then it's in contact centres. And this is the problem. If there has been physical domestic violence and that has been, reported to the police, then it should be followed up and there must be evidence with it, and it should be heard in a different court to be determined before it then comes before the family law court. And I don't believe that in a lot of cases, as I said, domestic violence, all it says is domestic violence, and unless the judge has read through the affidavits, the determinations and the proceedings of what's happened in the magistrate's court, and they're handling 80 to 100 cases a day. It's impossible for them to read everything. So they're only going on what's been put before them. So what has to happen is that I think there should be a category of domestic violence. Category 1 is texting or you're phoning up, that's domestic violence, or you told your wife you're spending too much money, or she's told him you shouldn't be going out to the sports playing golf again, because that's domestic violence. Whereas category 2 is stalking, a little bit more serious, and category 3 is a serious form of domestic violence. If the judge saw what category it is, to give him an idea, because they don't read through all the evidence before them, and they take a lot of it based on what the court reporters say and what's in there. It's just so frustrating to a lot of people who say, I didn't do it. And then those ones that lie in court, what happens to them? Nothing. Yep. That's the problem. Yeah. There's no perjury. And you can't allow that to happen. So these people must be heavily fined, and to stop the perjury, once we deal with that, it's like you tell a kid, you tell your own child, don't do it. If you keep talking, the child keeps going on and doing it until there is a form of punishment, whereas you say, okay, you're not going to the pictures, you won't be watching movies, you won't get to your computer. There has to be a form of punishment to say it will stop.
I would hope normal perjury penalties apply. Now, we've got this this question, and look, I've seen it quite a bit, so I'm going to allow it. It seems a little bit off-centre, but hey. Jack Clark asks, Pauline, please clear up an issue that people have accused you of being a Freemason. Are you?
Not at all. I've heard that before and someone else has put it out. This stupid...
I swear I'm not interfering in the technology right now. We just have to get you to repeat your last 5 seconds. It's your bandwidth seems to have dropped out. And I saw it, she rang up the... Hang on, just we'll wait for it to come back. I swear it's not me, and I swear it's not the Chinese. It could be the Freemasons.
No, definitely not. No.
Okay. I'm sure that last 10 seconds was really entertaining, but we lost it all.
Okay. Yeah. No,
you've heard that before. Well, you come to Pellowe Talk. We'll ask the direct questions and get the direct answers. Awesome. Just trying to see if there's one more question we can fit in before we run out of time. David Fanning says, do you know the secret handshake? All right, let's wrap it up there, guys. Senator Hanson, ladies first, final thoughts for the evening. Anything that you want to get off your chest, or things that you couldn't get out in the previous 90 minutes?
David, it's been a real pleasure to be on your program, and I think that it's great for people to be able to listen to these conversations and having, especially having Augusto on the program tonight, because he has been committed to Western Australia. So it's been very beneficial to a lot of people. I hope they've got a lot out of this tonight by listening to my comments. Like I said, I'm passionate about the family law, and as I am with the dairy industry and the Bradfield scheme, getting water to central Queensland. If I ever, in my time in Parliament, and hopefully I you know, if I get elected at the next election, these are things that I definitely want to see big changes to, and it'll be my legacy. Will be family law, the Bradfield scheme, and changing the dairying industries, and making sure that we look after our dairying industry in Australia. So they're important matters to me.
Those are good, and Karen probably sums it up well. Thank you for all you do, Pauline.
Yes.
So yeah, and Augusto, gentleman and a scholar, how would you like to sum up your thoughts on the evening?
Well, first of all, I must say that we desperately need to have more politicians of the caliber of Pauline Hanson in Parliament. And I can tell you one thing. I was, and I have to confess, a terrible sin. I was actually the vice president of the Liberal Party in one of the divisions here in Western Australia. And I'll tell you one thing that I must be very clear about this. It seems that if you are a man of convictions, you have very little chance to have an opportunity in the Liberal Party in these days. I can tell, for example, that there was a person in Victoria who was basically disendorsed because of her correct opinions about the problem of radical Islam, for instance. And that is considered to be a heinous sin. Another thing is that a candidate in the seat of Fremantle lost his opportunity to be a candidate because he seemed to be too conservative for the party. So we have really a Liberal Party that has no appreciation, no concern for freedom at all.
But Augusto, you're aware that I was actually thrown out, disendorsed by the Liberal Party in 1996? 16 days by John Howard. I called for equality for all Australians. They couldn't cop that, so they disendorsed me, and I went on to win the seat with the biggest swing in the nation.
Yeah, that's a badge of honor. That's a badge of honor. I perhaps will be very delighted when I see the day that I'm expelled from the party. I'm still a member of the Liberal Party, but I'll tell you one thing. The party no longer stands for freedoms in general, I must say. And the free speech issue is a good example. We had an Attorney General who actually had no idea that Section 18C is unconstitutional. And he even claimed that we have the right to be bigots in order to advocate for that particular section. I must say that he was either being disingenuous, but basically presenting an argument that was utterly unreasonable, or he has no idea about the content of the provision. And not only that, he's certainly hopeless when it comes to constitutional law matters, because I have written a whole book explaining why Section 18C happens to be unconstitutional. And by the way, most of these laws are used by the bigots as an instrument of persecution. So the more intolerant you are, the more you use the legislation. Well, of course, because you feel more offended. So if the threshold is feeling offended, of course, the most intolerant elements of the society will be using this sort of legal instrument. And I have tried to explain this to my colleagues and written articles about this to the general public, that we are facing a crisis of freedom in this country. And the Liberal Party, it seems that only stands for freedom in theory, but not in practice, because when we need them, they have failed and failed us miserably, I must say.
I love it when you get warmed up, Augusto. We've got Scott Brady saying, hurrah, Augusto. Fantastic. Look, I so appreciate your time tonight and the conversation that we can have at length and in depth. And to those people viewing who've joined us tonight, I think we've had our biggest ever audience on Pellowe Talk Live tonight. No doubt it was the gracious presence of Senator Pauline Hanson, Corrine Barraclough, and Professor Augusto Zimmermann, as well as a very important topic that touches many Australian lives. Can I encourage you, if you're watching tonight, go to the website, goodsource.news, SAUCE, and subscribe to our newsletter. It's only a matter of time before conservatives and strong conservatives get shut down by the social media corporate censors, shadow banned, restricted. Even if it looks like they're not touching us, you won't be seeing us. It's very important that you're able to get important news and updates directly to your inbox. It's also important to put your hand in your pocket and just support us if you can. It's completely free. There's no paywall behind anything. But we do rely on the free market and basically people saying, yep, we want more of that. And so what the Good Source is doing is amplifying conservative voices right of centre, who can provide a balance to the echo chamber of mainstream media. So we're looking forward to growing and doing more and more content and great news for you. And we'll be able to do that as the budget grows. We're able to grow the production team and get some great facilities and rival what the taxpayers fund for the left with the free market on the right. So thank you very much, everyone. Those details again, just in case you need it, goodsource.news, good SAUCE.news. It's fantastic. And to all the panelists, Corrine, Augusto, and Pauline, thank you again. And good night to everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.